Gerald Kersh was born in 1912 in Teddington-on-Thames to a Jewish family. He won a scholarship and attended Regent Street Polytechnic School from the age of 13. Then he took on a variety of jobs such as French teacher, freelance reporter, nightclub bouncer, cinema manager, or salesman, quote, selling everything from sausages to electric lights. In 1931, he was attacked by a man with a hatchet, and the resulting nerve injury gave Kersh frequent headaches and kept him awake at nights for more than 15 years. His first book, Jews Without Jehovah, is an autobiographical novel of growing up in the East End of London in an impoverished Jewish family. However, the book was withdrawn after only 80 copies were sold half a day into its sale, following a libel suit against Kersh and his publisher, courtesy of his 3 uncles and a cousin who found themselves represented in the novel. He garnered more success with his subsequent novel, The Night and the City, a novel of a would-be gangster and pimp which sold immensely well, additionally gaining Kersh $40,000 for film rights. However, the movie was so markedly different from the original book that Kersh joked he was the highest paid writer in history, receiving $10,000 per word, as the title is the only thing of his left in the film. Around the same time his publication career started, he also contributed to the magazines such as John O. London Weekly, Argosy, Lilliput, Playboy, Cosmopolitan, or the Saturday Evening Post. In 1940, Kersh volunteered to join the Coldstream Guards. Buried beneath a collapsing building during the Blitz, he was transferred to special duties and asked to write a pamphlet concerning infantry training. The result would be rejected by the War Office, so Kersh took it and expanded it into his acclaimed novel, They Die With Their Boots Clean, instead. Deserting aboard a plane in order to actually get to the front lines, as he was not allowed to do so otherwise, he was present for the liberation of Paris. He somehow avoided getting in trouble for his desertion and soon began to publish in American magazines. He traveled the world, building a house on Barbados, becoming a Canadian resident, and then in 1959 obtaining American citizenship. All in all, Kersh wrote 20 novels and 20 short story collections, writing even while suffering from aftermaths of his surgeries. He spent the last few years of his life in the hamlet of Cragsmore in New York State, dying of throat cancer in 1968. Of the 4 short story collections covered today, The Horrible Dummy and Other Stories is the earliest. Note, however, that there is much of a crossover even in the early Kersh collections, so sometimes when stories repeat between the collections, I will simply omit mentioning them. As well as those which are really brief and whose punchline is their whole lifeblood, so summarizing them would ruin the entire enjoyment. And since there are 4 books to cover, I shall relate only select ones, trying to leave you within a sufficient impression of the collection to see if it is to your tastes or not. The Undefeated is a story of a former boxer, recounting his ups and downs, and unlike many of Kersh's stories about boxers or wrestlers, this one ends on a bit of a positive note. The Extraordinarily Horrible Dummy is a short affair with a punchline that isn't too hard to guess when one assumes the fantastic may happen in Kersh's stories, and it is the first time in the collection that Busto, the apartment housekeeper, is brought up, just as he is in Lunatic's Broth, where he can't comprehend that no one can save his old dog's life after an injury even he has the money to pay up. The Devil That Troubled the Chessboard is a macabre story about a chess player haunted by a perceived poltergeist, pursuing him everywhere and destroying his things and papers and knocking about his chessboard. The Stone, in other collections retitled to The Beggar's Stone, is one of the more powerful stories in this collection, being the tale of an old stone which for centuries has been the gathering spot and resting place for wandering beggars and the homeless from the entire surrounding countryside. The 10 Old Tigers is a remarkably Leon Bloy-esque tale of a man leading a bunch of ancient army veterans to fight against the Germans during World War II after his entire unit deserts him. Comrade Death is a standout in this collection, a lengthy story about an arms merchant, rising to becoming one of the most powerful men in the world through his manipulation and fanning of war on both sides, while he spends his years embittered over the woman who would not love him, nor believe he had let her husband get killed so he could have her, humiliating him with her pity and kindness. And so Sarek spends his days inventing new and fantastic germs and gases and bombs in secret underground laboratories. The next collection to review is Neither Man Nor Dog. The title story recounts the bitter tale of a man's only friendship, that with a cockroach he befriends while stranded with little hope of rescue in a boat out in the middle of the ocean. The Last Battle is another story of the ring. Ali, an old fat wrestler, fights in the ring a horrible, bloody, eye-tearing match to try and maintain his record as an undefeated champion and show the world there is still some fight left in him. An undistinguished boy is certainly odd. focusing on a child who is unable to earn a sufficient reward for political activity. It is set in what is possibly an alternate history where the UK is dominated by Nazis and the SS, though it is left unclear whether it is something like Sarban's The Sound of His Horn or an alternate history where National Socialism sprang up in the UK instead. Wolf has Adze, the miserable castaway from the title story, recount how he and his father were beset upon by wolves when transporting 3 Cherkess girls, one of them his cousin, to be sold to a harem, and how only Adze himself managed to escape at the last minute at the price of a grisly sacrifice. A bang on the head for Dutoit is another story where one finds echoes of Blois. The story of a soldier knocked into a coma for decades after he prophesied that the French will assuredly beat the Germans back from Verdun during World War I. Fantasy of a Haunted Man is a body switch story which takes place in the midst of a lynching hunt in the US, with predictable karmic results. Who Wants a Liver-Colored Cat is a short tale of the constant and seemingly undefiable persecution of a man and his wife by a hideous, unkillable cat. The House of Relish is a longish, mostly heavily comedic and tongue-in-cheek narrative of the rise and fall of a pickle company and the family managing it. Red Gentleman of Staffordshire is the story of a man's love for his savage fighting dog and the suffering he feels when he is forced to maim him by circumstances and bring him to his death. The Fortunes of the Priskys is a chronicle of a long-standing begging family who believe themselves to be secretly rich thanks to decades' worth of hidden cash in old and ancient bills. Tread Lightly is the story of carpets and cheating, especially cheating of those who make them and who are being taken advantage of. The next collection to cover is On an Odd Note, published originally in 1958. There is a lot of repetition here, so there will be only a couple of stories that I will bring up. There is Seed of Destruction, the story of a man fabricating a destructive legend about an old item which he sells on to a pawn shop. Frozen Beauty, a melancholy story that reminds me somewhat of Marcel Schwab, of a man digging up an ancient frozen cave from the time of the mammoths and discovering a young girl in there frozen in the ice. The Queen of Pig Island is one of Kersh's most screwball stories, the tale of the suffering of a limbless woman washed ashore on an uninhabited island along with 2 malicious little people and an idiotic giant, as well as the local population of pigs. The Brighton Monster is the story of a Japanese man flung back to the time of 1745 England, where he is treated as a monster because of his tattoos and general appearance. The final collection we have, Nightshade and Damnations, was published in the year of Kersh's death and was compiled by his longtime admirer Harlan Ellison. Men Without Bones is the story of a strange crash site of an ancient alien spacecraft being investigated and the horror of tiny amorphous fleshy beings which devour you like a giant swarm of flesh ants if you come too close to them, leading up to a startling revelation concerning the human race. As a side note, Buster is a ghost too mean to go as a fright is simply a retitled version of Lunatic's Broth. The Ape and the Mystery is a conversation between Leonardo da Vinci and his beneficiary, talking about how vapid and stupid the original of Mona Lisa had been and the truly mundane secret of her smile. The King Who Collected Clocks is one of the most Kersh-like stories of Kersh I have yet read. It concerns itself with a man who became the keeper of an eccentric ancient king's massive collection of most curious clocks. A king whose fragile health alone keeps the country from being overturned by chaos and revolution. Bone for Debunkers is a story of Kersh's infamous rogue Karmesin, in how he manages to trick a bunch of pompous specialists to buy his friend's collection of ancient papers by faking an inscription that will prove quote-unquote Bacon as the real author of Shakespeare's plays. A Lucky Day for the Boar is a story within a story of a newspaper editor acquiring a story of a sadistic, horrific revenge where a man is kept in prison where in a matter of months he is made to feel that entire decades have passed, through tiny devious alterations and an incredibly mischievous attention to detail, making him age horrifically in body and spirit as a result. Whatever Happened to Corporal Cuckoo is one of Kersh's most famous tales, the story of an ageless soldier made immortal by happy accident, constantly striving to recreate the quack doctor's elixir that kept him alive all these centuries. Harlan Ellison once said of Kersh's writing that no mortal can write this well. I am inclined to believe that to be true.